from the Bladen County Sheriff's Office. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my strategy today and what it is we're trying to do at the DA's office and sort of how we've shifted this focus away from a war on drugs towards a war on drug dealers. And more holistically, how we're going to win this opioid crisis. It's a battle which I believe needs to be waged on 4 different fronts right now. There has to be prevention, there has to be treatment, there has to be rehabilitation, and then finally there has to be enforcement. And that's what we focus on. But enforcement standing alone is not what's going to happen. We're going to need our treatment providers coming in. We're going to need rehabilitation, and we're going to need prevention too, particularly reaching down to our children and talking to them about making responsible decisions. There are opioid task forces really in all 3 of the counties where I'm district attorney, and then regionally, you won't be surprised to hear that they're almost in every county we can think of. One of the things that I'm doing is I coordinate with my brother, who many of you know is a district attorney for New Hanover and Pender counties. We take a coordinated regional response to how it is we handle this problem. Both of us are working right now with Congressman David Rouser on a multi-county initiative right now around opioids. We're having a informational session on July 30th. Has anybody received information about this yet? Do you guys know about this? Richard Allen has been on this task force too. It's going to be from 6 to 8 o'clock at night on the 30th. And our ambition is to have it in Wilmington at the Coastline Convention Center, but it's going to be simulcast out to all counties in southeastern North Carolina, either at community colleges or in sheriff's offices. And so I expect in the next little while you're going to be contacted from someone from David Rouser's office and saying, please join us in this initiative. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to, again, think about best practices. And just so the right hand knows what the left hand's doing and we're coordinating better, we want to talk to folks about how you're responding to the problem. Because let's face it, right now there's sort of a patchwork quilt phenomenon that's going on with this issue. And the issues are really the same. Wherever you're at, I don't care if you're in Wilmington or you're in Columbus County, the dynamics that are driving this problem are largely the same, and the solutions, I believe, will be the same. And so the goal of this task force meeting on the 30th is to kind of talk about these 4 categories I mentioned: the prevention, the treatment, the rehabilitation, and the enforcement. 4 legs of the same stool, really, and we're going to have different speakers around each one of those topics. My brother and I are going to be talking about the enforcement of what we're doing in southeastern North Carolina. We're going to have other experts talking about their various specialties, and there might be some good information that comes out of that. I want to talk briefly about what just happened with the arrest of Dr. Kim, because as many as you know, for years he lived and worked in this community and got into some trouble here and sort of reinvented himself like a gypsy over in Tabor City. For lack of a better word, he was running what we call a pill mill. His office literally did not have any of the indicia of what you'd associate with a medical office. There was no diagnostic equipment. The people that worked there frequently weren't even nurses. When one of our confidential informants went in to get a prescription filled from him, they didn't even know how to take his blood pressure. They were milling thousands, hundreds of thousands of pills out of this one location. Parking lot full even at 12 o'clock at night. People traveling from out of state, just literally for the sole purpose of going to see this doctor and getting the prescription filled. The local pharmacies weren't even filling his prescriptions anymore. Walmart in Columbus County was not filling his prescriptions. Instead, people were going to various outlying areas, including Bladen County, to get those scripts filled. And so I'm so encouraged that I see ethical pharmacists among us who recognize that they're part of the solution and don't want to be part of the problem as part of this task force. Because I will tell you that pills are the gateway for much harsher drugs. 8 out of 10 heroin addicts came to know heroin through the use of pills first. And 75% of the people that are high in pills are using somebody else's prescription to get high. 75%. And so there's a real problem right now with pills in our community. And I suspect that now that we've taken down a major source and supply of pills in this area with the arrest of Dr. Kim and his associates, that the supply of pills on the street is going to tighten up substantially. That is both a good thing and a bad thing. And here's why it's a challenge for everybody in this room. Because I've seen this play itself out. I've been a prosecutor now for over 2 decades. Started out in Miami, Florida, worked for over 10 years in Wilmington, and I've been your elected DA for 8 years. And the phenomenon, these dynamics are the same anywhere you go. With heroin, what we see is that when the pill supply tightens up, and that's an opioid, traditional economic principles of supply and demand will take over in any economy, right? And it's no different in the drug game. When pills tighten up, the supply tightens up, the cost goes up. And when the cost of pills raises above the cost of a bundle of heroin on the street, what happens is that addicts who need to get their high shift over from pills to heroin. And then you have unwittingly created an even worse problem in your community. And I can tell you right now that I fear that's what's maybe coming to Columbus into Bladen counties. In anticipation of this moment, I personally met with every magistrate in Bladen County and Columbus County. You might have heard my brother and I make a bold announcement in March of this year, where we said we're asking for $1 million bonds for heroin traffickers. We're treating heroin differently as a unique subset of the opioid crisis, because heroin mixed with carfentanil is what's actually killing people. And so all the overdoses that you're hearing about in our coastal counties are driven by heroin mixed with carfentanil. And I'm determined not to let that become an issue here in Bladen to the extent that I have anything to do with it. And so the very clear message that we've sent to all drug dealers is, it's business as usual with all the drugs you've always been dealing with, and we'll handle those the way we always have. But if you get caught with heroin, we're asking for $1 million bond, your immediate incarceration, and we're gonna try to only offer you prison, not probation on the back end, with the hope that it actually shifts their behavior over, and that seems to be working. Steve Lanier, and I wish he was here to give me an amen and hey brother when I say this, will tell you that for the first time since I've been district attorney, we have more people with pending cocaine cases in the system than heroin, which in some respects is actually a good outcome. Not to say cocaine's a good thing, it's the devil too, trust me. But people aren't overdosing on cocaine, okay? And I suspect that the dealers are shifting back over to cocaine in large part because we made the cost of doing business way too high for them for dealing with heroin. Again, in realizing that Bladen County is ripe for a heroin problem and doesn't currently have much of one, I think Richard would tell you that. I've met with all of our magistrates and said, you know what, if we do start getting heroin in this community, will you support me and hold people in custody on $1 million bonds? And they've all agreed to do that. And we've already been seeing evidence of that here in Bladen County, so I'm very encouraged by that. But I want to, encourage all of you to remain committed to this cause. I think the solutions, again, are going to be largely with you and community outreach as we address this together. Hopefully we can all speak about this issue in common terms with the same language. And I would hope you would recognize too that heroin is something that we really need to keep our eyes on. Because that is truly what's leading to the overdose deaths in southeastern North Carolina. We've heard of this miracle drug Narcan, that like Lazarus brings people back from the dead, right? Of this first 600 administrations of Narcan in the state, 300 of them were in the Cape Fear region. This is truly the tip of the spear for the opioid crisis. And again, if you think our problems are bad now, I hate to sound the cautionary tale, they can get a lot worse unless we're very vigilant together in keeping heroin out of Bladen County. And so the arrest of Dr. Kim's and people like him, and probably pharmacies realizing what it is we're doing and tightening up some of their internal restrictions, I think is going to create an environment where people are going to naturally turn to another place to get their high. I would hope that they would turn to that for treatment, but to the extent that they're looking for other illicit drugs to fill that addiction, let's keep them away from heroin. The final thing I would tell you is this, recognizing that we are gonna have people who are addicted who are gonna need to get high somehow. The very day that we announced that we were arresting Dr. Kim, I scheduled a meeting with the folks at Trillium. Trillium is the MCO for Columbus County, as East Point is the MCO for Bladen County. And they're the ones in charge of putting the healthcare providers in place that can administer drugs to deal with people in medical terms. Very encouraged by the fact that they just awarded a state contract to a group called Port out of Greenville, whose ambition was to open up, I think, in September or October. And I said, can you open up more quickly than that? We're already getting calls from people saying, hey, I need to get my prescription filled, I can't do that. What can we do for these folks? Because they're gonna need Suboxone or Methadone in place of the pills that they've been illegally prescribed for years. And so they're working very quickly to get up and running. I would encourage you that if you don't have a resource like that in this community, and maybe East Point can speak to this, to have a recognized treatment option in place for people who are living under the scourge of addiction. Because their options choices, if they're not getting Suboxone, they're going to turn somewhere else to get their drugs. It's a worse option. So I would encourage this group to do what we can to support that as well. Obviously, I'm very passionate about this issue. I could talk for hours about it. I know you have a packed agenda, and I wasn't even on it. I'm really here because Quentin McGee is stuck in court today, and he's very committed to coming and being a part of this group too. So thank you for allowing me to come and briefly address you guys and to be a part of this.